I'm Paul Calvo, and I'm a director in the Biotechnology Chemical Practice Group at the Washington, D.C. based intellectual property law firm Sterne, Kessler, Goldstein Fox. I'd like to take a moment to provide a brief update on the status of biosimilars both in the U.S. and abroad. Now, depending on your viewpoint, you might think that that is a question of taking one step forward and two steps back. If you've been waiting for the coming of biosimilars in the U.S., well, the wait goes on. Since the passage of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act on March 23, 2010, the FDA has been in the process of implementing an abbreviated licensure pathway for biosimilars. The FDA has released several guidance documents related to biosimilars, with the latest covering the process of having formal meetings between FDA and biosimilar biological product sponsors. That guidance document was issued in March of this year. To date, though, FDA has not yet approved, let alone has anyone even filed, a Section 351K biosimilar application pursuant to the Biosimilars Act. There have also been efforts to dampen enthusiasm for biosimilars as well. For example, in April 2012, Abbott Laboratories filed a citizens petition requesting that FDA not accept for filing, file, approve, or even discuss with any company any application or any investigational new drug application for any biosimilar that cites as its reference product any product for which the BLA was submitted to the FDA prior to the date on which the Biosimilars Act was enacted. FDA has not yet substantively responded to the petition, but they have been moving forward with informal meetings with biosimilar applications, so the feeling is that they have actually informally rejected Abbott's petition. There's also an ongoing debate about including a 12-year period of exclusivity for biological products in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement chapter on intellectual property rights. A more recent development, however, is that many states, most notably California, have begun passing legislation trying to regulate when pharmacists can substitute a biosimilar for a prescribed biologic. These types of legislation are opposed by the generic pharmaceutical industry because arguably they create a burden on the pharmacist to substitute a biosimilar for a biologic, and thus makes it more difficult or maybe less likely a pharmacist will do so. In fact, this type of legislation prompted FDA Commissioner Margaret Hamburg to comment that efforts to undermine the trust in these products are worrisome and represent a disservice to patients who could benefit from these lower cost treatments. That said, biosimilar sponsors are definitely forging ahead with development and look to be poised to introduce the first biosimilar application in the U.S. According to one report, FDA continues to meet with sponsors interested in developing biosimilar products, and as of the last week of August 2013, the agencies received 57 meetings for an initial meeting to discuss biosimilar development programs for 13 different reference products and held 47 initial meetings with sponsors. Further evidence that it is only a matter of time came earlier this year when Amgen and Hoffmann-La Roche were sued by Sandoz, which alleged that their generic form of the arthritis drug Enbrel is not infringing two of Amgen's patents, and furthered that a delay in the patent's issuance renders them invalid. The picture for biosimilars in Europe is almost completely opposite to what's happening in the U.S. While uptake varies across the individual countries, there are 15 approved biosimilar products on the market in Europe. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, the European Commission made healthcare history with its first approval of a biosimilar monoclonal antibody, known as Inflectra, which was developed by South Korea's Celltrion and is going to be sold by Hospira. But even with approval in the EU, companies don't expect to file for U.S. approval until 2015 because they're waiting for the FDA to finalize its regulatory pathway. What makes the approval of Inflectra so noteworthy is that monoclonal antibodies are about as complex a biologic as one can develop. When you think of the complexity of a monoclonal antibody and the complexity of its manufacture in comparison to a smaller biologic such as insulin, or even a small molecule drug like aspirin, the fact that biosimilarity was able to be demonstrated is remarkable. So as it stands now, Europe continues to forge ahead with approval of increasingly complex biologics, while the U.S. seems to be in a bit of a holding pattern as the final pieces of the regulatory puzzle for biosimilars fall into place. Thank you.